Chapter 16. Nick grinned to himself as he knelt on the floor in the kitchen of the Romriell house. He loved listening to the sisters talk about their plans and goals for the place. He could feel the excitement in the air surrounding them. This was the type of project he'd wanted to do for a very long time, but he'd never really had the chance. The sisters intrigued him. All of them, but to him the most intriguing was Alyssa. She was the oldest, but the others seemed to be protecting her from something. It was strange. Still, he was very excited to be part of this project, following what they were thinking about. Amanda had given him some rough sketches of what she was looking for in the way of cabinets, and then she provided him with pictures as well. If all of the sisters were as focused and clear about what they were looking for, he had a feeling they would get along just fine. When lunchtime rolled around, he went in search of one of the sisters, any of the sisters, so he could let them know he was leaving for lunch. He hadn't realized he'd be starting a job that day, or he'd have brought his lunch with him. He found Alyssa in the living room with a laptop on her lap. "Alyssa?" he said. "Yeah." She glanced up from her computer, giving him her complete attention. He liked knowing she was actually listening to him. Cammy had spent all of her time looking at some screen and never really paying any attention to him. It made him crazy. "I'm going to head out to grab some lunch. I'll be bringing my lunch from now on, but I didn't know I'd be starting a project today." Alyssa frowned. "Why don't I run and get lunch for the both of us? That way you don't need to stop working for quite as long, and I can learn my way around better." "That would be great. I was thinking about just grabbing a burger. The Burger Hut is open. Down on Main." She nodded. "What do you like on your burgers?" "Everything. Get me a double cheeseburger and a large onion ring. A Dr. Pepper to go with it." He would have rather gone with her so they could chat as they ate, but he knew better. He needed to steer clear of women for a little while, and he was already comparing this one to Cammy. That wasn't a good sign. "All right. I'll be back in a flash." Nick watched as she headed out the door and returned to his project ripping up floors. He needed to limit his alone time with that sister. The others didn't bother him like she did. The woman already held some kind of power over him, and he didn't need to mess with her. She was back a short while later with 4 bags of food and a soft drink. She walked into the dining room with them, and he followed his nose. "Thank you for getting me lunch." "How much was mine?" Alyssa shook her head. "Don't worry about it. I got lunch for my sisters and myself as well, and I have no idea how much one meal was." She walked to an intercom button on the wall in the dining room. "Hey everyone. I've got lunch. Meet me in the dining room." She dug through the sacks and pulled out his double cheeseburger with onion rings, handing it to him. "The drink is yours as well." She wandered out of the dining room and came back a moment later with a couple of 2 liters, 1 Coke and 1 Sprite. She had a pile of red Solo cups on top of the Coke bottle, and she immediately opened it and poured herself a glass. The sisters came in one after the other, each of them plopping down on a chair at the formal dining table. "Thanks for being willing to not eat in the kitchen for a little while," he said, happy that they were respecting his need for keeping the kitchen off limits while he tore things up. "No problem," Alyssa said, dumping out fries and onion rings onto a couple of paper plates and liberally squirting from a bottle of fry sauce onto each of the plates. "None of us have any desire to eat dust anyway." Obviously, the sisters all ate their burgers the same, because they each just grabbed one and used the paper as a plate. Then they shared the fries and onion rings, each of them seeming to eat from both plates. It was interesting to watch them eating together as if they'd done it 1,000 times before, and he was sure they had. He didn't have a sibling of his own, so he'd always been fascinated by large family dynamics. "How's it coming?" Amanda asked him. Find anything strange we should know about? He shook his head. Nope. It's all going perfectly and as expected. He took a swallow of his Dr. Pepper. I should have the floors up by the end of the day, and I'll start on the cabinets if there's time. I guess I should tell you that I'm going to be around here a whole lot while we get the kitchen done. I'll be here by 7 every morning and working until 7 or so. You're all going to be sick of me soon. Alyssa tilted her head to one side. If you're going to be working that many hours, we can at least provide snacks for you. Tell me what you'd like us to keep around, and we'll do it. Nick shook his head. You don't have to do that. Sure, we do. We're insisting the work is done quickly, which is going to be making you work ridiculous hours. It's the least we can do. He'd never had anyone keep snacks around for him before, but it felt good that she'd offered. He listed a few things that would be easy to eat while he continued working, and she nodded. I'll make sure they're here for you tomorrow. Thanks. I appreciate it. Nick finished the last bite of his burger. I'm going to head back to work. Thanks for the lunch. No problem. Alyssa said, tapping his snack requests into her phone. As he got back to work, Nick realized that the job he was doing for these women was going to keep him busy for a long time. They'd already said that if they kept him on for the bedrooms, they didn't all have to be done by June 1st. No, those could be finished one room at a time, and that suited him just fine. There was enough to do without having them all done on time. As he worked, he wondered which books the sisters would choose to base their rooms on. He couldn't wait to find out. Their excitement with the project was contagious, and he was right there with them. Chapter 17. The following week, the kitchen was closed to the sisters. The floor was torn up, the cabinets were out, and the entire room was being painted a mint green that set off the flecks of color in the tiles Amanda had chosen. Alyssa spent more time than she should have studying for her test, but she made sure she checked on Nick at least 5 or 6 times during the day. She didn't know why she was so drawn to the man, but she couldn't seem to help herself. There was no refrigerator, and the stove had been taken out. The kitchen had been completely gutted to make room for the changes they were making. It felt strange to see it that way, and she tried not to imagine her mom's face if she saw her kitchen at that moment. She still went for her run every morning, but she wasn't moving nearly enough throughout the rest of the day, and she knew it. She needed to fix it, but until she was finished studying for her real estate license, she wouldn't be able to change things much. Studying had to be her first priority. Nick had started timing his coffee break with the time she returned from her run every morning. He would bring them each a mug of coffee and whatever sweet treat he found sitting on the dining room table. They always seemed to have cookies or donuts or muffins around. She'd just returned from her run for the day, and she was settling on the couch to reach for her laptop and start her daily studies when Nick walked into the room, a mug in each hand and a box of cookies stuck under one arm. It'll be nice when Hannah opens the bookstore. She's planning on having someone there baking cookies and cakes all day. Then we can get fresh cookies, he said, handing her a mug of coffee. Or we can just wait for Lauren to start making cookies and muffins every day, which she certainly plans to do if you ever finish the kitchen. She hid her grin with the coffee mug. Sure, blame the contractor for the lack of fresh baked goods in the house. He shook his head. Why do I take coffee breaks with you again? Penchant for punishment, she asked. That must be it. He set the cookies on the couch between them and rubbed the back of his neck. You know, I love that you girls are painting things exciting colors and not just white or off-white. Those colors are fine, of course, but they're not interesting. When I walk around wearing white paint, no one notices. Now people can see me coming. No one else around here paints using colors? Really? Some people do, I guess. Kemi never let me, and I always found that really annoying. Nick shook his head, reaching for one of the cookies. Cammy? Alyssa asked. He wasn't married, was he? How could that have escaped her notice? Oh, I forget you're not from around here. Cammy was my fiancé until a couple of months ago. He shook his head. I had already decided she wasn't the right woman for me, and I was just waiting for the right time to break things off. One day, I got home from work and found her, in a delicate position with another man. Oh. That's terrible. He shrugged. It would have been a whole lot worse if I'd been in love with her, but I already knew it wasn't a good idea to marry her. She wasn't right for me, if that makes sense. Makes perfect sense. I think we all have people like that in our pasts. Alyssa reached for a cookie, and their fingers collided as he was getting another. She drew her hand back as if it had been burned. Sorry. Don't be. All you have to do is tell me you want to hold hands, and I'm happy to oblige, he told her with a wink. Eating one last cookie, he drained his mug and got to his feet. Same time tomorrow? She nodded, not quite meeting his eyes. Sounds good to me. Coffee is what I always need right after that run. I'll bring more. He sauntered out of the room, and she took a deep breath. She was already counting down the hours until their next coffee break. Asterisk. Early the following afternoon, Alyssa took a break from her studying to go check out the work Nick was doing. Walking to the spot where the hallway met the kitchen, she looked in as Nick was stretching, his muscles showing well under his tight t-shirt. The shirt was obviously what he always painted in, because it was splattered with paint in an entire rainbow of colors, though it had once been royal blue with the words, Bears written across it for the Bear Lake Bears. How's it coming? She asked softly from the edge of the room, afraid to walk in and disturb him too much. She had no desire to be as covered in paint as he was. He turned and smiled at her. Going good, I think. I should have the painting done today, and I'll start putting in the cabinets tomorrow. I've been building them at home, getting them ready. I've already got them stained. I can't wait to see them. I hope you ladies love them as much as I do. I made the kind that roll out so you have more storage space. It's what Amanda told me she wanted. Sounds good to me. It'll be fun to cook in here when it's all nice and pretty and functional. Alyssa didn't have a clear picture of what the room would look like as her sister did, but she was sure she'd love the finished result. Amanda was amazing at what she did. She took a step into the room, walking past where the island had been, and didn't watch where she was going as well as she should have. She tripped over a paint tray that was setting in the middle of the floor, her eyes only on him. She felt herself falling and let out a little squeal as she was caught in strong, masculine arms. Suddenly she was out of breath, and she knew it wasn't her near fall. No, it was the strong arms that were wrapped around her. She couldn't stay that close to him and still be able to breathe. It wasn't physically possible. He helped steady her, keeping his arms around her for a moment longer than he should have. Her eyes met his, and she felt her heart skip a beat. She wanted to kick herself. This was the first man she'd spent any real time around since she'd broken things off with Tim, and she shouldn't be falling for him. She giggled a little as she thought the words, realizing they had a double meaning. Thank you for catching me. He grinned, pulling her just a little closer. Thank you for needing to be caught. She blushed, stepping back. I should get back to my studies. Is that what you're doing in there on that computer? What are you studying for? He asked. I'm getting my real estate license for Idaho as well as Utah. I want to be able to buy and sell homes all over Bear Lake. I was a real estate agent in Salt Lake City for several years before we moved here. She didn't mention how successful she was at her career, because she didn't want him to think she was bragging. I think you need a study break, and I know I need a break, too. Take a walk with me. Alyssa considered it for a moment, but she shook her head. I really shouldn't. She couldn't get attached to a man yet. She wasn't ready. If she walked with him, what was to keep her from losing her heart completely? I know you run every morning, but you spend the rest of the day sitting. I know the paint fumes aren't good for you. Walk with me. Get some fresh air. Nick smiled, and a dimple stood out on his cheek. Sitting is the new smoking, you know. At least that's what I keep hearing. She bit her lip, worried about herself as she actually considered walking with him. All right. His whole face lit up in a grin. Hopefully this cold snap will end soon. He frowned out the window where a light snow was falling. It's almost May. I know. But at least the snow here is pretty and doesn't look like someone dumped dirt all over it. She went to the closet in the front entryway, grabbing her coat. She could do without mittens, but a coat was definitely called for at that moment. He grabbed his own coat from the closet, where he'd been invited to hang it on his second day there. Let's go. He held the door open for her, and she stepped out in front of him, noting that his hand immediately went to her elbow. She remembered seeing a man help a woman that way on her last date with Tim, and she'd hoped Tim would someday learn to be just as gentlemanly. But here was a man who already knew how. He didn't even need to be taught. Together, they walked down toward the lake. This was a new snowfall, and there was no standing snow, so they didn't have to worry about trudging through it on their way down to the lake. I can't believe you came here every summer and we never met. I've known Hannah since we were both in elementary school. Alyssa nodded. It does seem odd, but I think you were a couple years ahead of us, from what Hannah said. She and Hannah had spent some time together over the weekend, and she had asked a few questions about Nick. She shouldn't have, because she needed a break from men, but she couldn't resist. Nick filled her mind whether he was there or not. Yeah. I was a senior when she was a sophomore. You two were in the same grade? Yeah. We met the summer before we both started kindergarten. I think we played together every single day that summer. Her mother would come over and watch the two of us play in the water. I think they liked having the private beach access. Alyssa could still remember playing with Hannah that way. They'd built so many sandcastles. Nick smiled. Your mom didn't watch you? Never. Hannah was the youngest in her family, so it was easy for her mom to watch us. She just had those two brothers who were tons older than her. My mom had Taylor and Amanda at that point, and if I remember right, she was expecting Kayla. I haven't met Kayla yet. She's a house flipper, right? She is. She'll be at least another 3 weeks, but I'm sure we'll have the two of you work together when she gets here. There's no way she can do so much on her own that quickly. Alyssa stopped on the sand right in front of the edge of the water, feeling the snow landing on her face. I love snow so much more here than I do in Salt Lake City. He laughed. Everything is prettier here, but it's not always a convenient place to live. She shrugged. I'll happily run to Logan for big grocery runs if it means I can live here the rest of the time. She tilted her head back just a little so she could catch snowflakes on her tongue. Nick chuckled. You're not seeing anyone in Salt Lake? Alyssa shook her head. She considered telling him she'd just broken up with someone, but she decided against it. It was good to be completely free of Tim and meet someone who knew nothing about him. Not at the moment. No girl for you? He shook his head. Footloose and fancy-free. He reached for her hand, taking it with his, and pulling her to his side. She looked up at him warily, wondering exactly what he wanted from her. That's good, she mumbled. He turned to her, cupping her face in his hands. He slowly lowered his head, giving her every chance in the world to pull away from him. Alyssa watched his head slowly descend to hers, and she thought about pulling away, but she felt as if he was a giant magnet and she was a small piece of iron. His kiss was something she'd wanted for what seemed like forever. It might be the biggest mistake of her life, but she would feel like she wasn't really living if she didn't go through with it. Wrapping her arms around his shoulders, she clung to him for dear life. Her lips parted slightly as he deepened the kiss, and when he pulled away, she felt bereft, missing his touch. I'm not sure I meant for that to happen, she said softly. I'm sure I did. It's all I've thought about since the moment I laid eyes on you. Nick smiled, his eyes looking deeply into hers. And I plan on doing it again the first chance I get. She bit her lower lip for a moment, wondering if she should let herself get carried away by him. I don't know if I'm ready to get involved. I have news for you, Alyssa. I already feel involved. It's too late to go back to the way things were. She sighed. I was afraid of that. He grinned, and it was a little lopsided, which she hadn't noticed before. Who could keep their heart locked up when it came to Nick and his lopsided grins? Go out with me tomorrow night, he said. It wasn't a request either. It was a command. Alyssa took a deep breath and jumped off the deep end. Why not? She felt so much for him that she couldn't keep hiding away behind her laptop. All right. He smiled. I'm going to leave at 6:30, shower, and come back for you at 7. Does that work? Am I going to go out with a man with paint in his hair? She asked, trying to make a joke of it. Tim had always wanted her to be so perfect, but she didn't want that from Nick at all, and he didn't seem to want it from her. She never took special care with her appearance around the house, and he apparently didn't mind. She loved the way he had paint specks in his hair, and he worked so hard. He was someone she could see herself falling completely for. God help her. Probably. I mean, I can use turpentine and try to get it out, but I don't know how wise that would be. It would also take a long time. I like the paint flecks, she said softly, wondering what she was doing. Good. Because I like you, and they seem to be a part of me, whether I want them or not. He took her hand and pulled her back toward the house. I'd better get back to work, or the boss may fire me. Alyssa looked up and saw the faces of all three of her sisters pressing against one of the windows upstairs. She did her best to ignore them, knowing what they all must be thinking. She was falling for another man who would control her every move. But he wouldn't. She wasn't going to let that happen again. Losing herself in a man again was out of the question. Chapter 18. When Alyssa got back into the house, she went upstairs to confront her sisters about their spying. Did you guys see enough? She asked, frowning. Lauren laughed. We saw that kiss. She waved her hand in front of her face as if she was fanning it. Looked like a pretty hot one to me. I didn't know we were supposed to be watching you two on all those coffee breaks. When did this happen between you two? Taylor asked. Why aren't you telling us everything? We want to live vicariously through you. Alyssa shook her head, looking at Amanda. Nothing to add? Well, you have a mint green handprint on your butt, but nothing else. Amanda smirked at her. Alyssa's face went red. I do not. Amanda pointed to a mirror, and it was then that Alyssa realized her sisters were all in her room spying on her. Why that hadn't connected before, she wasn't sure. She walked over to the mirror and turned so she could see her bottom, and her blush got worse. It's not on my butt. Just my hip. Someone's picking nits, Lauren said, shaking her head. And here we thought you were the serious one, always with your head buried in your studies. It's hard to believe you're the one with a handprint on your bottom. Oh, hush up. Alyssa walked to her closet and found a clean pair of jeans, stripping off the paint-covered ones right there as she pulled on the new ones. Better? Taylor smiled. I'll say. You're putting weight back on, but you've got so much muscle tone, you look amazing. Alyssa sat down on the edge of her bed and glared at her sisters. You complain I have paint on my butt, and then you critique my body when I change? There's no doubt you're my sisters. Amanda walked over and put her arm around Alyssa. None at all. And there's no doubt we love you beyond measure. Alyssa rested her head on Amanda's shoulder for a minute. We're going out tomorrow night. It's my first date with someone other than Tim in like 8 years. I don't even remember how to act. Not like you acted around Tim. He found it too easy to control you. You have to remember to show some spine. Taylor folded her arms as she looked at her sister. And you should wear something fun. None of those boring business suits you always wore with Tim. Alyssa sighed. All right. I can deal with that. Amanda got up and went to Alyssa's closet, pulling out different things for Alyssa to potentially wear. I think this is just perfect. She pulled out a skirt that stopped right above the knee and a long-sleeved blouse. You should wear this with some boots. Amanda kept digging and closed the closet door, frowning. You don't have any knee-length black boots. What is wrong with you? She shook her head. I'll loan you mine. She disappeared from the room, and Alyssa sighed dramatically. I feel like you guys are making me your project, Alyssa said. Am I so desperate I need to be a project? Lauren pursed her lips for a moment. Do you want me to answer that honestly, or just smile like I didn't hear the question? Why have enemies when I have sisters? Alyssa asked, just as Amanda came back into the room with a pair of boots in her hand. Amanda put the footwear at her sister's feet. Well? Alyssa shook her head. Well, what? Go try the outfit on so we can see how it looks all together. Alyssa groaned dramatically. I feel like a Barbie doll you guys are dressing up and trying to change. We don't want to change you, Taylor said seriously. We want to help you make the most of who you already are. No one is ever going to try to change you again on our watch. Alyssa stood up and walked to Taylor, hugging her tightly. I do love my sisters. And we love you right back. Now try on the clothes, Lauren said with mock exasperation. Alyssa quickly stripped and put on the change of clothes Amanda had picked out for her. When she was finished, she did a slow spin for her sisters to see all the angles. That's perfect, Taylor said with a smile. I get to do your hair, Amanda said, rubbing her hands together. You could use a haircut, but I think I can make it work. Alyssa groaned. But who's going to do my makeup if you do my hair? She asked sarcastically. Oh, that's totally my job, Lauren said. I can't wait to get my hands on you. She walked into Alyssa's bathroom and started digging through the drawers there. Is this all the makeup you have? She held up a small makeup bag. I don't wear much. Well, I'm at least using my lipstick on you. It's kiss-proof, and from what I can tell, your lips will be naked halfway through the night if you don't have kiss-proof lipstick on. Lauren shook her head at the meager makeup she found. Don't tell me. Tim didn't think you should wear makeup? Alyssa frowned at her sister. He controlled every little aspect of my life. I lost myself trying to be who he wanted. Please don't ever let me be that stupid again. I don't think we'll have to stop you, Taylor said softly. I think you're too strong to go back to being anyone's puppet. Puppet? Alyssa thought about the word for a moment before she realized just how well it suited what she'd been to Tim. I guess I was. I'm so glad I dumped him and moved on. And I'm glad you slammed his foot in the door, Taylor. That made for some special memories. I just wish I'd done it a little more violently, Taylor said, grinning. No more talk about Tim. Tell us about that kiss we watched. Did it feel as good as it looked? Alyssa smiled, and when she caught a look at her face in the mirror across the room, she realized what a dreamy, happy smile it was. Maybe she was doing the right thing by going out with Nick. He was already making her happier than Tim ever had. I'm not going to kiss and tell. No, but that smile tells us everything, Amanda said with a grin. Tell him that we all need men just like him. I think we all need to focus on the band B for a while. I shouldn't even be dating the man, but I can't seem to help myself. Taylor shook her head. With what you went through with that idiot, you have every right to be happy, and if Nick makes you happy, then I for one am all for it. I do think he's going to make me happy, Alyssa said. And he doesn't seem to want me to become something else. He's happy with me just how I am. That's pretty special. Lauren grinned. I want a man just like him when I grow up. Well, if I ever thought that would happen, Alyssa winked at Lauren. Lauren stuck her tongue out at Alyssa, making her point for her. Call with Kayla is tonight, right? I hate that we couldn't do it before, but I love that we get to do it now. Do you have your list ready? Lauren asked Taylor. I do. And I have several potential names for the band B, too. I think once we get these things settled, Amanda can work her magic, and then Kayla and Nick can work their magic, and we'll have a magical band B. Taylor rubbed her hands together. I'm so excited, I could just spit. Why would excitement be wrapped up with spit? Lauren asked, looking a bit confused. No idea. That was something Hannah and Alyssa used to say all the time. Being here must have brought it back. Taylor shrugged. Besides, I want to emulate my big sister whenever I can. You're all crazy, Alyssa said. Now, I'm going to change back into my clothes I was wearing before. Well, the new clothes, and I'm going to soak the paint on the butt jeans, and then I'm going to go back downstairs and do a little more studying. You have all interrupted my day enough. We interrupted your day? Taylor said, looking shocked. I was working on ideas for the band B when Lauren called us all in here to watch you and Nick on the beach. My day was interrupted very rudely. Alyssa stood up and changed, deciding to pretend her sisters weren't there. They were all annoying anyway. Back as you were. There will be no more beach kissing shows today. Well, none starring me anyway. She left her sisters lounging in her room as she headed downstairs to her work. And to Nick, which was so much more important than any studying could ever be. She sighed. Could Nick really be the man she'd dreamed of her entire life? It sure felt like it. Chapter 19. Alyssa and her sisters gathered together around 7 to call Kayla. They did a FaceTime call from Alyssa's Mac so they could all be part of the call. They put the Mac on the coffee table, and the four of them sat close together on the couch so they were all in the picture Kayla would see. Kayla answered immediately. Hi. I miss you guys. We miss you, too. It feels like it's been forever since we last saw you. 2 weeks isn't forever, but it's starting to feel that way. Kayla frowned. I wish I could get this wrapped up faster, but I found some mold in the basement, and I'm having to pull out all the carpet and redo so much. The basement is finished, where it was before I started ripping it up. I'm going to have to refinish it, so it's going to add weeks if not months to this project. Alyssa shook her head. That's awful. You have no idea. Kayla rubbed her hands over her eyes. All right, let's start this business meeting. We're looking at names for the band B? Taylor nodded, picking up her notes. That's one of the items on the agenda. Let me tell you the names I've come up with, and we'll vote. Perfect, Kayla said. She leaned forward eagerly. It'll be nice to think about something other than my troubles for a minute or two. Our mutual futures sound like a good topic to me. Well, I'm going to throw out the 4 ideas I've come up with, but we can entertain any ideas. We're not limited to these. Taylor glanced at her list. Lake House Band B. Bear Lake Band B. Richland Band B. Sisters Band B. Alyssa wrinkled her nose. The locals call it the Romriell House. Why don't we just use that instead? A slow smile spread across Taylor's face. I love that. Why didn't I think of it? Shrugging her shoulders, Alyssa said, because you haven't yet learned to think like a local. Taylor rolled her eyes. Any other suggestions? Amanda shook her head. Nope. But I'm with Alyssa. I like the Romriell house. Me too, Kayla said. And me, Lauren responded. Well, that was easier than I expected it to be, Taylor said. We'll officially be called the Romriell House. There's a company in Montpelier that we can hire to make our sign. She seemed truly excited to have finished their first task. I've already set up the corporation. Lauren and I will be drawing a salary bi-monthly. Everyone else will receive quarterly payments. Kayla, if you do work for us, and I know you eventually will, you'll be paid bi-monthly as well. Does that work for everyone? There were nods. No one else had really thought about how the money would be split, because none of them were hurting. Well, Lauren didn't have much, but she didn't have any real expenses either. Lauren leaned toward the monitor. Just so you know, Alyssa is going out with our contractor tomorrow night. He's sexy, and you should have seen their first kiss. I could feel it from the beach. Lauren waved her hand as if fanning her face. Alyssa shook her head. Only because you were spying on us. Kayla laughed. Lauren, you need to call me tomorrow with all the juicy details. I can't wait to hear, but we're derailing Taylor's meeting, and she scares me when she's in business mode. Taylor glared at Kayla. So, back on track. Amanda thought it would be a good idea to do themes for the rooms, and we've decided to do a book theme for each guest room. I'd like to choose 11 themes. We'll only use 7 to start with, but I don't think any of us are planning to live here forever. There were nods. Sounds good, Alyssa said. She was excited to hear the list of books her sister had come up with. I want us all to vote for our top 11 themes out of the books I have listed. And anyone can feel free to add another, of course. We want to make this fair. Taylor looked at Kayla. Do you have pen and paper? I think we should all make notes as we go. Kayla nodded. I do. Let's do this. Okay, let's just write them all down and number them with your top 1 through 11. We can vote from there. Taylor took a deep breath. And here we go. A Wrinkle in Time, Hunger Games, Jurassic Park, Princess Bride, Gone with the Wind, Pride and Prejudice, and of Green Gables, Heidi, Bridges of Madison County, Harry Potter, Sherlock Holmes, Romeo and Juliet, Scarlet Letter, Huckleberry Finn, Moby Dick, Frankenstein, Flowers for Algernon, The Giver, The Time Machine, Beauty and the Beast, 1984, and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. She spoke slowly and clearly, giving her sisters time to write them all down. You forgot Carrie. Alyssa complained. You know I want a Carrie room with blood dripping down the walls. Okay, we'll vote on Carrie as well. Taylor shook her head as she added Carrie to her own list. Anyone else want to throw something out there? Lauren pursed her lips. How about In Death? That series Nora Roberts writes as J.D. Robb. I think that would be an amazing room. They all dutifully added In Death to their lists. Cyrano de Bergerac, Amanda suggested. When no one else added anything, Taylor said, now, number them from your top favorite to number 11. Amanda can get started on the designs for the top 7 immediately. Oh, I can. Really? Amanda asked with just a touch of sarcasm. This was your idea? Taylor reminded her. And it's a good one, Amanda replied with a smirk. Mark your favorites. Quickly, so we don't waste too much of Kayla's time. Kayla has nothing more important to do than chat with her favorite sisters. Kayla grinned, looking down at her list. It took them all less than 5 minutes to finish, and Taylor ran down the list again, asking if anyone had voted for each individual book in their top 7. When they had all finished with the voting, Taylor sighed. Well, that was fun. Here's our list. The first 7 to be done are Harry Potter, of course, Hunger Games, Beauty and the Beast, Princess Bride, Moby Dick, and of Green Gables, and Pride and Prejudice. Then our 4 runners-up, which will be done as the house gets emptier with sisters and fuller with guests, are Jurassic Park, Frankenstein, Huck Finn, and Heidi. She looked over at Amanda. I'll give you my list in the order I want the rooms done tomorrow, so you can get started. No, Carrie? Alyssa said, trying to sound mortified. You were the only one who even thought Carrie should have the possibility of getting a vote. No, Carrie. No blood running down the walls of one of the guest rooms. Sorry to disappoint you, Alyssa. Amanda shook her head. Fine. Alyssa grinned. She wouldn't have been able to walk in the room if they'd done it anyway, and she was sure she was going to be asked to help keep things clean at least while she lived there. Kayla smiled. Is that all our business for the day? Yup. That's it. We've covered everything we need to cover. Good. I was thinking of driving up next weekend, but with the flooding in the basement, I'm going to have to resist for now. Kayla shook her head. I want to see my treehouse. Taylor opened her eyes wide. I forgot. There is something else I want to discuss while we're all here. Go for it, Kayla said. I was thinking we might want to spruce up the treehouse and maybe build some playground equipment. A volleyball court wouldn't go amiss. And when everything else is done, maybe an outdoor kitchen. This is the perfect place for cookouts, and since I plan on a mini fridge in every room, that could be a free service we offer the guests. They'd have to sign up in advance so every single guest isn't trying to use it at the same time, but it really would be nice. Alyssa nodded. I think that would be smart. We certainly have enough land for it. Are we sharing the hot tub and sauna with guests? Lauren asked. I hadn't thought of that, Taylor said. Probably, though. I think it would be a selling point. We're going to want to make sure it's drained and cleaned more often, then, Alyssa said. That will be a little extra work. Extra work for the girl with a liberal arts degree? Lauren asked. I really don't know what else to do with that piece of useless paper. They all laughed. You know, you have a degree, and that's pretty awesome, Kayla said. I don't. Alyssa shook her head. You guys are a mess. Taylor, I think the ideas for the outdoor kitchen and the playground are wonderful. It will bring in families as clientele, and I think we all want others to have the same special memories of this home as we do. They chatted for another hour about nothing and everything. Finally, Kayla yawned. I was up at 5 ripping out the flooring in the basement, and I have a lot of long days ahead of me. I'm going to hang up now and take a long hot shower for my aching muscles, and then fall into my bed and sleep like the dead until about 5 tomorrow morning. Alyssa glanced at the clock on her laptop and saw that it was after 9. Sounds good to me. I want to get a little more study time in before bed anyway. Are Idaho laws so different than Utah? Lauren asked right after the call ended. I just need to make sure I know them cold. You know what an overachiever I am. I accept nothing less than perfection. Alyssa hated to admit it, but she was pretty darn crazy about doing everything to the very best of her ability. It was both a strength and a weakness. I do, Lauren said. That's why I worry about you sometimes. You try so hard and obsess about doing everything just right. I'd be happy to make a passing grade. You won't be any more licensed with that higher score. I know. Alyssa shrugged. Maybe I'll get past it someday, but for now, it serves me well. It does. Lauren got to her feet. Well, good night. I'm going to sleep like the dead. Amanda and Taylor both got up to leave as well. We're going to work in the dining room on some of the room ideas, Taylor said. Sounds good. Alyssa already had her study program up and was working on a practice test. They'd accomplished the family business, and now it was time for her personal business. Chapter 20. When Nick arrived at work on Saturday, he was feeling a little self-conscious. He wasn't sure Alyssa had noticed, but all three of her sisters had been in an upstairs bedroom watching them when they'd come back from the beach. It wasn't that he wanted to hide their relationship, but it was strange that they'd been all looking on the way they had. He got to work painting straight away, not paying any attention to the comings and goings of the sisters around him. He'd gotten used to their chatter after almost 2 weeks of working there. It was past 8 when Alyssa walked into the kitchen. There are donuts on the dining room table, and there's more than enough to share, she said softly. But I have a bone to pick with you first. He frowned at her, wondering what on earth she was upset about. He hadn't talked to her since the afternoon before, and she'd been perfectly fine with him then. His gaze dropped to her lips, and he briefly considered pulling her to him for a kiss, but her annoyed look put that idea to rest. What did I do? You put a mint green handprint on the butt of one of my most comfortable pairs of jeans. He smirked, shaking his head. Oh, did I? He'd realized it the day before, but he could just imagine the look on her face if he'd told her, so he'd kept that little piece of information to himself. You knew you did. She glared at him. You could have told me. One of my sisters pointed it out, and they all laughed at me. Isn't that what sisters are supposed to do? He asked. He wasn't even a little bit repentant. He'd branded her as his in the only way he knew how. The fact that it hadn't been deliberate was beside the point. I'd really rather they didn't. She shook her head at him. I can't believe you didn't say something. I wasn't sure how you'd react, he said honestly. Besides, it will make for great memories of our first kiss. Her eyes grew wide, and she stepped back a little. Why do we need memories? It's easy enough to do it again if we want. Anytime we want. Now sounds good, doesn't it? He looked in every direction before catching her hand, pulling her toward him, lowering his head, and kissing her softly. Good morning. Don't think you're going to get past me with your sweet talk and even sweeter kisses. You're still in trouble. You think my kisses are sweet? I can change that at any time you'd like. She laughed just a little. You, Nick Piot, are incorrigible. And you, Alyssa Romriell, are beautiful. I can't believe I made it through 32 years of life without you in it. He kissed her once more and raised his head when he heard applause. All three of her sisters were standing there watching them. That's the way to kiss her, Lauren said, cheering him on. I have a feeling we're going to have to do any romancing we want to do away from the house, he said, shaking his head at them. Do you not understand that your sister needs a little bit of privacy while a man kisses her socks off? Oh, pardon us. Amanda put her arms around Lauren and Taylor. We'll just go eat our donuts, and leave you two to it. Carry on. She turned them all around, and they walked like a six-legged monster toward the dining room. Alyssa's face was flaming red. Is sororicide illegal in this country? If it is, I might have to get a law degree just so I can fight the law. He laughed. You love your sisters too much for that. He sighed. Let's go get some donuts before your sisters eat them all. I get the lemon filled. Alyssa said, heading into the dining room ahead of him. You can have whatever the vultures leave for you. Taylor gasped. Did you really just call your favorite sisters vultures? At the moment, Kayla is my favorite sister, Alyssa said, reaching for her lemon-filled donuts. That's understandable, Lauren said. I mean, we did interrupt a makeout session in the kitchen. An entirely inappropriate makeout session, I might add. That's not what we hired Nick to do. Alyssa sat down amidst the teasing and sighed. I forgot to get my coffee. They had plugged the coffee maker into an outlet in the dining room, so they wouldn't miss out on their daily dose of caffeine. She got up and poured herself a mug, looking around. Anyone else need a shot? Nick held up his own mug, and her sisters all already had drinks. He watched as she sat back down, directly across from him. He liked her there, because he could look at her to his heart's content. So, I should have the painting finished today, and then I'll start laying the floor. Cabinets will go in tomorrow or Monday. He was getting fatigued by the 7-day work weeks, but he'd definitely worked them into his quote, and he wasn't going to complain even a little bit. So, I'll be able to start cooking again tomorrow? Lauren asked. Nope. Appliances won't go in until Tuesday or Wednesday, probably. I'll do everything I can to get all the tile laid today. He rubbed the back of his neck. But I'm leaving 30 minutes early this evening. I have a hot date. Alyssa turned red yet again, and he loved it. The woman could blush like no one he'd seen since high school. No comment. All of the sisters laughed, and he grinned. She is fun to tease, isn't she? More fun than any of the rest of us, that's for sure, Amanda said. She is the only person I know who blushes quite that easily or that red. It's pure joy to watch. I have to agree with that. Although, I'd be happy watching her all day even if she wasn't blushing. He watched her and noticed her color deepening. I do think we should lay off, though. I mean, her extremities need blood, and it's apparently all in her face. Alyssa finished her donut and got to her feet. I'm going for my run. She walked toward the door, wearing a pair of leggings and an oversized shirt. He loved seeing her legs with the skin-tight pants. She was the most beautiful and real woman he'd ever known. There were no complaints on his part. After the door closed, he felt the eyes of every sister on him. You will not hurt her, Lauren said softly. She's fragile, and she's had enough ridiculously controlling men in her life. You will not be another. Amanda's eyes narrowed at him. We like you, Nick, but we will do everything we can to make your life a living hell if you cause her to shed even one tear. Taylor nodded, letting him know the threat was from her as well. I don't intend to hurt her. She's way too special for that. Nick frowned. I guess you all gang up on every man who is interested in her. Taylor's eyes looked bleak. If only we had. We're trying to rectify past mistakes. Nick had no idea what it was that had them all so upset and protective of their older sister, but he would be extra careful with her feelings. He had no desire to hurt her, but more than that, he had no desire to let her get away. He wanted a lifetime with her in a way he'd never wanted with anyone else. He'd proposed to Cammie because she'd pressured him a lot, finally telling him she was going to dump him if he didn't. He shouldn't have given in to the pressure, but he hadn't expected to find anyone quite like Alyssa. I'm going to get back to work. I promise I will do everything in my power not to hurt her. She's going to feel loved and cherished on my watch. He left the three sisters sitting at the table, returning to his job. His mind was on everything they'd said. He wished they'd met 10 years before. It would have saved them both a lot of heartache. If she'd been hurt so badly, it did explain how skittish she'd been. Picking up his paint roller, he lost himself in his work, but he couldn't stop thinking about Alyssa and wondering what exactly had happened to make her younger sisters so terribly protective of her. Chapter 21. Alyssa ran on the beach that morning because it had finally stopped snowing, if only for a day. She knew there was a great deal more snow in the forecast, but the sun was shining, and the birds were singing, and she was going to take advantage of it. As she ran, her mind flowed from topic to topic, and she had to wonder what was wrong with her sisters to always feel the need to make her blush. She was both apprehensive and excited about her first date with Nick, and she knew her sisters would milk her embarrassment for all it was worth. When she had finished her run, she studied a good portion of the day, sitting in the living room. It was shortly past noon when Nick came to the doorway, looking at her. "I thought you might want to see how the floor is coming." She set her computer down and walked with him to the kitchen, smiling when she saw how good the tile looked. She was glad to see the brown-patterned linoleum gone and the pretty tiles taking its place. "It's starting to look really good. Just wait until all the new stainless steel appliances and the cupboards are in. This kitchen is going to be a showpiece. I can't wait. I want it to be done now." He grinned. "So, what books did you ladies decide on in your meeting last night?" "You did have it last night, didn't you?" She nodded. "We decided on a bunch. I think the first one that you'll be working on is End of Green Gables. I'm not painting a mural on the wall or anything, am I?" "I don't think so. If we need something like that, I'm sure we'll call in an artist. We have an aunt who used to summer here with us. She is absolutely incredible. Hopefully, if it comes to that, she'll be willing to do a mural. I honestly am not sure what Amanda and Taylor have in mind for things like that. I guess I should ask, but I trust them both, so I'm not overly concerned about it." "Makes sense." He reached down and caught her hand with his, giving it a good squeeze. "Go back and study, and I'll work. I'm excited about spending some time with you tonight." She smiled nervously. "Me too." Standing on tiptoe, she pressed her lips to his cheek, feeling very brave as she did so. Tim had hated her spontaneous shows of affection and had verbally beaten them out of her. "Feel free to do that anytime," he said, wiggling his eyebrows at her. She was surprised at how good his words made her feel, almost completely blocking Tim's voice out of her head for the moment. Okay, back to studying. Back to laying tile. It was hard to walk away from him, and that surprised her. She'd always been mildly relieved when she no longer had to spend time with Tim, but she'd wanted more time with him anyway. She was sure she'd been demented for the 7 years they were together. There was no other explanation. It was just after 5 when Amanda came downstairs. "Time to get ready." Alyssa frowned. "I have 2 hours. And we're going to take every minute of that time," Amanda assured her. "Up you go. Shower and wash your hair. I'll be waiting." "Fine." Alyssa stomped up the stairs, grudgingly. It wasn't as if she'd never gotten herself ready for a date. She was perfectly capable of doing this with no help from her sisters. She truly wasn't sure what their problems were. She took a long, hot shower, refusing to be rushed. When she was finished, she walked into her bedroom and was surprised at the fact that all 3 of her sisters were there. "Et2, Taylor?" "I'm just here to watch the show." Taylor grinned at her happily. "Great. Maybe if you guys film it, you'll get some kind of award for the biggest transformation in the history of women." "I think that went to Eliza Doolittle." Lauren looked at her for a moment. "We're starting with a facial." "I know you don't want it, but I really don't care at the moment." She walked to her sister and put some sort of gross cream on her face, slathering it everywhere. It took her more than 5 minutes to cover Alyssa's face in just the way she wanted. "I have a little goop left." "Sit up, Taylor." Taylor had been lounging on Alyssa's bed as if she owned the place. Taylor shrugged and sat up. "I can use all the beauty treatments you want to give me." Lauren didn't respond to that nonsense as she smeared the cream on Taylor's face. While Alyssa watched the whole process, she was aware that Amanda was messing with her hair. She may not look like herself that evening, but that would be a good thing, right? Her sisters chattered around her as she sat and allowed them to pull and prod her for the next hour and a half. Finally, her mask was off, and her hair was finished. "Don't look in the mirror until you're dressed and your makeup is on," Lauren said, waiting as her sister changed into the clothes they'd picked out for her night out with Nick. "Now sit again, and I'll fix your makeup." Alyssa sighed. "You guys aren't going to do this every time I have a date, are you?" "Nope. We're going to teach you to do it," Lauren said. She looked like an artist with her palette as she held all the colors of eyeshadow she was using in one hand and a small makeup brush in the other. Blink. They barely had her ready in time. It was 5 minutes before 7 when they finally let Alyssa look in the mirror, and she felt as if she was seeing someone else. Her lips were a much brighter shade of red than she would have put on herself, and her eyes were painted darkly. "I think it's too much makeup." Taylor shook her head. "No, it's just the right amount. You look even more beautiful than usual, Alyssa. Don't you dare wash your face." Alyssa sighed, turning her head to one side as she looked at how her hair had been done. It curled softly around her face. "I won't wash my face." She picked up her purse. "I need to go down and wait for him." "Oh, no you don't. You do not need to look overly eager." "Make an entrance," Lauren said. "I draw the line at making an entrance. Making him wait would be rude, and that's just not who I am." Alyssa walked down the stairs, and the doorbell rang just as she got to the bottom. She walked over and opened the door, smiling at him. "Let me just get my coat." Nick grinned, grabbing her hand. "Get your coat, but first let me tell you something." She looked up at him. "What's that?" "I think you always look beautiful, but tonight, you've knocked my socks off." With those words, he let her go, and she hurried away for her coat. It took her a minute to calm her breath after his comment. How was she going to make it if it didn't work out between them? Her heart hadn't been broken when she and Tim had ended things. In fact, she'd been more relieved than anything else. With Nick, she knew it would be different. He was going to really hurt her if they couldn't make things work. When she got to the door, he helped her put her coat on, and she looked back to see all 3 of her sisters watching them. They were ridiculous. "Go away." Taylor smiled. "Don't stay out too late. You need to be able to study tomorrow." "Don't do anything I wouldn't do," Lauren added. Amanda just stood there grinning at them, looking like a lunatic. Why she loved her sisters was beyond her at that moment. All she wanted to do was get away from them and be alone with Nick. "Let's get out of here," she said. "Don't keep her out too late," Taylor said to Nick. Alyssa was sure she was moving on to Nick because she hadn't been able to get a rise out of her. Whatever. She just needed to be away. "Ignore them," Alyssa hissed under her breath. "I'll take good care of her," Nick told them. "Drive carefully," Amanda said as they closed the door behind them. Alyssa shook her head. "All but that last thing was a joke. We're always a little worried when one of us goes out after dark now." "Why is that?" She looked at him with surprise. "You know our parents were killed in a car wreck in March, don't you?" "No. I'm so sorry." Alyssa shook her head. "Why did you think we were taking over the house?" "I guess I never really thought about it." He took her hand in his and squeezed it. "I'll be extra careful." Chapter 22. Nick couldn't believe he'd talked Alyssa into going out with him. She seemed a little too classy for him, but he was happy to spend time with her. He took her to a local restaurant. It wasn't the nicest one in town, but it was the nicest that wouldn't have a problem with him having paint in his hair, and the green just wasn't coming out. He'd at least washed up, and he wore a pair of slacks and a collared shirt, realizing that though Cammy had wanted him to dress nicer, and he'd refused, now he was dressing up for Alyssa without being asked. He wanted to please Alyssa in a way he'd never cared if he pleased Cammy. When he walked into Hank's bar and grill, he felt every eye in the place on him. He'd lived there for too long for him to get by with bringing in a new girl without everyone saying something. Hank's place was very much a country restaurant. The place was wooden and looked very homey to him, and he always felt good there. There was music blaring from karaoke night in the corner, and people seemed excited as they sang along. No one was really dancing yet, but that usually happened on karaoke night. He wished he'd chosen a quieter place, but they would make it work. A short blonde who he'd known for years came over to seat them. "Hey, Nick. How's it going?" "Good. How about with you?" "I'm expecting again, and I'm sick all the time, so you really don't want to ask me that." She picked up 2 menus and led them around the tables to a quiet corner of the place. Well, as quiet as a local hangout could be on a Saturday night. "Stacy is going to be your server tonight." "Sounds good. Hope you feel better." Alyssa looked at him curiously. "I take it you know her?" He looked over at the retreating blonde. "Jennifer?" "Sure. I've known her forever, like everyone else in town." She smiled, shaking her head. "It surprises me just how small this town is." "It's home," he said softly. "Yes, it is." He looked up and saw Ryan headed straight for them, a soft drink in his hand. "Hey, man." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Hello. And who is this lovely lady?" "This is Alyssa Romriell. She's been a summer person her whole life, and she and her sisters are turning their family's vacation house into a band B." Nick wanted to hide her away from the prying eyes of his friend, but he knew that wasn't wise. Ryan looked at her curiously. "Now, I can't imagine you being with Nick willingly. I want you to blink 3 times if you need help. If you want to be rescued by a gallant gentleman without green paint in his hair, I'm your man." Alyssa smiled at that. "I really did agree to go out with him." Nick shook his head. "This joker is my best friend, Ryan. We've been inseparable since we were both in diapers." "It's nice to meet you," she said softly. "Now go away," Nick told his friend. Instead, Ryan snagged a chair from another table and sat in it backward, taking a drink from his pop. "He doesn't mean it," he told Alyssa. "He loves me like a brother." Nick said nothing, just leveling a stare at his friend. "I do love you like a brother, but I'd love you a lot more if you were across the room." "See how he treats me?" Ryan said, shaking his head sadly. "I don't know how we've stayed friends all these years. I should have found a new best friend by now, don't you think? No one else would have you, and you know it as well as I do." Nick looked up as the waitress approached. "Hey, Stacy." "Hiya, Nick. Good to see you out and about." Stacy looked at Alyssa curiously. "You here with him on purpose?" Alyssa laughed. "You're the second person to ask me that. I promise I do not need to be rescued, and we don't need to have a secret signal like me blinking 3 times rapidly so you know to get me out of here." "All right. If you say so." Stacy grinned at her before turning to Nick. "What can I get you? Other than a tow truck for this reprobate, who should not be horning in on your time with the lady." Nick glanced over at Alyssa. "We haven't had a chance to look at the menu yet, but I'll take a Dr. Pepper, and if I know the lady at all, she'll have a Coke." Stacy looked at Alyssa. "Does he know you?" "He does. But he doesn't know that I drink Shirley Temples everywhere. I think we'll have cherries and grenadine." Alyssa shrugged, looking at Nick. Sorry, but I had to follow my taste buds and not let you be right. He sighed. I'm never right. Stacy laughed and hurried away. Ryan had to pick up the conversational gambit. I have to agree with Nick. He is really and truly never right. If you don't mind that, though, you two will probably get along fine. Alyssa shook her head. I'm glad Hannah is more supportive of me than you are of Nick. Hannah? Ryan asked. Not Hannah Baldwin? Yes, do you know her? She laughed softly. Why do I even ask? Everyone here knows everyone else. Ryan shrugged. Sure, I know Hannah. I've known her all my life. I have, too, Alyssa said. We met this summer before we both started kindergarten. Hannah is the one who told me about the job at the Romriell house, and she's the reason I have it. I'm not sure Alyssa would have taken a chance on me otherwise. Nick reached for the drink Stacy set in front of him, taking a sip. Now, Ryan, if you'll go away, the lady and I can decide what we're having for our dinner. Ryan frowned. You want me to eat alone? You're not here alone any more than I am. You're either here with a girl or here with a buddy. I'm here with Billy Johnson from Georgetown. He wanted to drink and needed a designated driver, and he always calls me. He knows I won't let anyone be on the roads drinking if I can help it. But you left him alone? Ryan rolled his eyes. He's flirting with a bar stool and calling her Sally. He's totally wasted. We already ate, and now he's on to the antic portion of his evening. He stood up, smiling at Alyssa. I'm glad I got to meet you. Welcome to living on the lake full time. Very nice to meet you, Alyssa returned. You can always tell something about a man by the way he treats his friends. Ryan laughed. Now don't go dumping Nick for the way he treated me there. I was infringing on your date. This is our first date, so there would be no dumping. It would simply be a refusal to go out again. Well, don't do that either. Ryan lifted his glass in a salute, backing away from the table. When he was completely behind Alyssa, he caught Nick's eye, giving him a thumbs up. Nick ignored his friend and opened his menu. They have great fried cheese curds here. The burgers are to die for. Alyssa smiled, opening her own menu. Let me see what catches my eye, and I'll ask if it's any good. The only thing I don't like is their country fried steak. It's no good. I'll keep that in mind. He watched her as she perused the menu, glad that they were finally alone, well, as alone as they could be in a room full of people. I think I'm going to go with a bacon cheeseburger. How are the fries? It's Idaho. All the potatoes are fabulous, he said, winking at her. She laughed. I've heard that somewhere before. Do you want to split a fried cheese curd to start off with? I'd love to. She took another sip of her Shirley Temple before pushing it to the edge of the table. You already need another? My body wants all the sugar it can get its taste buds on. He reached over and took her hand in his, not caring that everyone in the bar was watching them. I can understand that. He frowned at her. Tell me about your parents. She shook her head. I'm not sure I'm ready to talk about that just yet. The loss is too recent. Why don't you tell me about Ryan? Nick smiled. He really is like a brother to me. Our moms were friends all through school and they were pregnant at the same time. We were expected to be best friends, and we were. His parents were killed by drunk drivers when we were in high school, and he moved in with my family. My parents already saw him as another son, so it worked out perfectly. I can see that. Alyssa smiled, squeezing Nick's hand. Sounds like your parents are pretty amazing people. They are. I wouldn't trade them for anything. Chapter 23. After her real estate exam in Pocatello a couple of weeks later, Alyssa made the long drive back to Richland. She'd received texts from all of her sisters and from Nick asking how she'd done on the test, but she'd stayed radio silent, wanting to tell them in person. She loved this drive and the beauty of the area, though it was snowing as she made her way home. Why it was snowing again in mid-May was beyond her, but she really did hope it was almost done for the year. The snow felt better in Idaho than it ever had in Utah, but enough was enough. Walking into the house, the first person she saw was Nick, who was building a counter and a place to hang keys in the entryway. She didn't meet his gaze and walked straight to the intercom. "I need to see everyone in the kitchen, please." Then she went to the kitchen and pulled out the things she needed to make a sandwich. She'd been so excited to tell everyone that she hadn't wanted to stop and eat, and now she was famished. Maybe she'd have 2 sandwiches. Nick joined her in the kitchen, looking at her with a raised eyebrow. "You want to tell me how it went?" She shook her head, still avoiding eye contact. She was sure he'd be able to look into her eyes and see that she had passed. She wanted to tell everyone all at once. Within a minute, all of her sisters, except Kayla, who had found another leak in the house she was working on, were in the kitchen with her. She finished her sandwich and looked up, and she knew her grin was completely covering her face. A perfect score. Lauren laughed and walked over to hug her. "You and your perfectionism." Nick waited until her sisters had all congratulated her before moving in on her. He wrapped his arms around her and lifted her off her feet, spinning her in a circle. "You amaze me a little more every day, Alyssa." Alyssa grinned up at him, wondering how she'd gotten so lucky to have a man like him interested in her. She felt like she was walking on air half the time. "I'm just glad it's over, and I can move on to finding an office." "You know of any place?" she asked Nick. He had so many more connections in the area than she did that it only made sense to ask him. If something was available, he would know about it. "I think I do." "Do you care if your office is on this side of the Utah border or the other?" "Not at all. I just care that I don't have to drive more than 30 minutes. Nick nodded. "I know just the place, then. We'll go see it tomorrow." "Tomorrow? What about the entryway?" Alyssa felt herself getting excited to have some time to do something with him during the day, but she didn't want to monopolize him when there was so much work to be done. "I'll have that finished today." Amanda frowned at him. "What about the bedrooms?" He sighed. "I've worked 4 weeks without a single day off. How about letting me spend a day with the most beautiful woman I know?" Taylor nodded. "You deserve a day off. Sorry we've worked you so hard." She glanced at her phone. "Tomorrow's Friday. Take off until Monday, and then start on the bedrooms. If they're not all done by the 1st, life will go on." "I'm not going to do that. I know how important this is to you ladies. I think I can do my part in a bed and bath in about 3 days. We want as many of them fully functional as we can make happen." "That's true," Taylor said with a nod. "And since we're all here, we got our first reservation today." Lauren squealed, hugging Taylor. "Wow. 2 things to celebrate." "Well, 3 if we include the entryway being done. It's like everything is falling into place." Amanda nodded. "I'm thrilled. And I may go with you too to see that office. Maybe we could divide one in half, and I could work out of it, too." Alyssa shrugged. "That's fine with me if Nick doesn't mind." "Oh, sure. I don't care. I was going to take you out for a nice lunch, but I guess we can all go." He didn't sound terribly thrilled about taking Amanda along, and she understood, because she wanted to be alone with him, too. But it made sense for the 2 sisters to see it together. "Sounds good to me." Alyssa grinned. "I can't wait to start working again. I feel like I've been sitting around way too much lately." We all have, Taylor said. I'm ready for this place to be up and running. She looked at Nick. How much of the time you have allotted for doing the rooms and bedrooms will be devoted to cleaning up when you're done? He shrugged. Couple of hours each, probably. Lauren clapped her hands. I can do that. It'll give me something to do other than practice making breakfasts. Well, that'll help, then. Nick grinned. We're going to be ready on time. I promise you that, ladies. He wrapped his arm around Alyssa's shoulders. But I want a 15-minute walk on the beach with this sweet girl before I finish the entryway. Anyone care? Amanda shook her head. You two go and have fun. Take 20 minutes if you want. Alyssa laughed. You're so generous. She walked to the fridge and got 2 bottles of water, handing Nick one. We'll be back soon. They both had to put on winter coats to go outside, despite the fact that it was mid-May. Finally, he opened the door and led her outside. I love the smell of new fallen snow. Me too. I love that you can smell the snow here and not just the pollution. Hand in hand, they walked toward the water. There was no standing snow, even though it was falling from the sky. I hope it's not cold enough for the snow to accumulate. I'm kind of done with it. He laughed. You can be done all you want, but I'm not sure it's over yet. He pulled her closer to him, wrapping an arm around her waist as they walked. I'm really proud of you for doing so well on your test. She rested her head against his shoulder for a minute. Tim would have found something she should have done differently. Probably complained that she took time from him by studying so hard when a 70 would have been good enough. She was so glad Nick was different. Thank you. I'm really excited about starting a business here. You should be. He kissed the top of her head. And if anyone needs a contractor. She laughed. Yes, I will recommend you. But I would have anyway. I know that. They reached the edge of the lake and turned to walk along it. Is the office you saw in Garden City? He nodded. There are actually 2 in that same building, and from what I understand, both are kind of small. You and Amanda may want to each get one. We probably will. I'm not one to spend much time in the office, but we'll see. I do need space for files and all that good stuff. So now that you're done studying, do you have any big plans? She shrugged. I need to go to Utah on Monday. I have a client who thinks she found the house she wants, but I need to show it to her. I'll probably spend the night with Kayla. Oh. I didn't realize you'd still be working with people in Utah. Not often. This one is special. I sold her the house she owns now, and she's ready to upgrade. She doesn't want to work with anyone else, so it's got to be me, apparently. That actually makes a lot of sense, he said. I would probably feel the same. Have you ever thought about buying a house and fixing it up to be an Airbnb or even flipping? I could see you doing really well at that. He shrugged. I've thought of it. I don't want to have to deal with the Airbnb, though. Sounds like it would be a pain in my butt. She laughed softly. Well, maybe it would. She stopped walking and looked at him. Do you realize I don't even know where you live? He chuckled. A cabin in the woods between here and Fish Haven. I built it myself between jobs. It's pretty special to me. Well, I'd love to see it someday. He leaned down and brushed his lips against hers. I guess we can make that happen. You just let me know when you're free. She pursed her lips. Maybe I could cook you supper there tomorrow, since you're off work. I think that would be amazing. We'll dump your sister after lunch, and I'll take you back to my place. I love the idea of just sitting around with you and spending time together. Or we could catch a movie if you'd prefer. Why don't we rent a movie from Amazon, so we can be alone? They had never truly been alone. Their walks on the beach didn't count, because she never knew if she had a sister or three watching from one of the windows. That sounds like the perfect solution to me. As they headed back toward the house, she tried to decide what to cook the following night. Whatever it was, she needed to wow him. She wanted him to keep her around. Chapter 24. When Nick went to pick up the two sisters the following morning, Alyssa insisted they take her SUV because it would be easier for them all to fit than in his pickup, and he held his hand out for the keys. She frowned at him. Are you kidding me? You don't trust me to drive? Sure, I do. I just know where we're going, and it'll be easier than trying to give you directions. He preferred to be in control when it came to vehicles, and he always had. He didn't want to tell her that, though. It would probably be best if she didn't figure it out until they'd been married 10 or 20 years. She sighed, putting her keys in his hand. Fine. She got into the passenger side while Amanda got into the back. What are we doing for lunch? He shrugged. I don't really know. I just figured we'd go somewhere. Amanda leaned forward. That's what I like. A man with a plan. We'll eat. I'm hoping my favorite burger place is open for the season, but if not, there's a great little place in Garden City where we can go. Nick looked at Amanda in the rearview mirror for a fraction of a second as he spoke. Do you have any idea when the crepe place opens? Alyssa asked. I remember going there every summer, and I might start going there every day once I start working out of the office. He could hear the excitement in her voice as she talked about them. He laughed. I think they open the weekend of Memorial Day like everything else, but I'm not sure. Asterisk. When they reached the building the offices were in, Nick took Alyssa's hand. I hope you like this place. I think it's just perfect. There was a commercial real estate agent waiting for them at the door. Who's the office for? She asked. My sister and I are both looking for offices. I'm a real estate agent, and she's an interior designer. I see. Well, let me show you what I have available. I'm Margot, by the way. I'm Alyssa, and my sister is Amanda. They followed Margot into the building and down a hallway. I have two offices, and either would work. Margot opened a door to the first one. It was extremely small, but it was all Alyssa would need. She walked in, smelling deeply of the room. She'd learned that she couldn't deal with musty smells very well, but the office smelled clean. This would probably work for me. Alyssa opened a door and found a bathroom. Does this connect to the other available office? She asked. Yes, it does. Let's just go through here. Opening the door, Margot showed them a second office that was just a touch bigger. Amanda walked in and spun around. This one would work better for me, but I'm not sure we could share like we talked about. She went to the window and looked out. These are small. I agree, Alyssa said. How much? The agent named a price that Alyssa was surprised by. That's extremely reasonable. I want the smaller office, I think. Amanda smiled. And I'll take the bigger one. Well, you two are easy to get along with, aren't you? Margot pulled a folder from under her arm and opened it. I brought the paperwork. A 12-month lease is required, and the owner does want a deposit. Margot went on to explain all the details, and the sisters grinned at each other. I'm glad we're going to be work neighbors. Alyssa said. It'll be really nice when we're not living together anymore. Yeah. I agree. Not sure how much longer I'm going to survive with a communal kitchen. Alyssa laughed softly. We're only a month into this thing. I know. Whatever. I'm getting a dorm fridge for my office, I think. And a microwave. Is there a shared kitchen here, too? Amanda asked Margot. No, there's not. Most people have a microwave and fridge. Now, I do need you to know that hot plates aren't allowed. That makes sense to me. Alyssa signed her name on the line indicated by Margot. 30 minutes later, they left the building. Now, food. Amanda said. I'm hungry. My burger place isn't open yet, but I'll take you to that place I like near here. Nick got into the car and waited for the sisters to do the same. What are you making me for supper tonight? Alyssa smiled. I'm making fajitas. How does that sound? Good to me, Nick said. I can't believe I haven't even shown you my house yet. I'm awfully proud of it, and I usually show it off pretty darn quick. Well, you have been at my house every day and working ridiculously long hours. It makes sense. Yeah, it does. He watched her for a moment, smiling. I'm excited to show it off to you tonight. Amanda sighed. I'll just sit back here and pretend someone is talking to me. Play on your phone, Alyssa said. Nick grinned. We'll try to include you. Sorry for that. No big deal. I have a phone. Chapter 25. After lunch, Nick dropped Amanda off at the house, and then he and Alyssa went to the grocery store. He insisted on buying the ingredients for the meal. Is this the grocery store where Hannah worked? She asked. Yup. She worked here for years. I'm surprised you didn't come see her while she worked here. Alyssa sighed. After high school, I did the college thing, majoring in marketing. I was so busy every weekend that I never made it back with my parents. I did summer school every year and just threw myself into being a perfectionist like I'd always been. You've always worked this hard? He asked, a little surprised. Our parents instilled a strong work ethic in all of us. I was valedictorian of my high school class and graduated summa cum laude from my college. And I immediately started my real estate classes when I was done. I never took the time to come back to the lake because I was too busy adulting. I regret that now. So even after you started selling real estate, you never took a weekend off? Nick had thought he was a hard worker until he'd met Alyssa. Very rarely. There were always people who needed to see houses on the weekends. Saturdays have always been my biggest sales day. She shrugged. And I started seeing someone, and he took up a lot of my time, too. It was the first time she'd mentioned Tim to him, and she wasn't sure how much she wanted to tell him, but he had to know he wasn't the first man she dated. Oh? She nodded, putting grated cheese into her cart. Yup. I just got out of a 7-year relationship in March. Best thing I've ever done for myself. He didn't ask anything else, and she didn't volunteer more. They checked out, and then he drove the short distance to the cabin. Heading up the long driveway, he grinned. So, I usually start planting around the 1st of June. I like to have flower beds along each side of the driveway. Are you going to have time for that this year? She asked. I have no idea. I sure hope so. I might have to hire someone to do the lawn and maybe do some planting. Makes sense to me, Alyssa said. We've never mentioned your parents really. Are they still in the area? He shook his head. Nah, they moved somewhere warmer a couple of years back. Got tired of the cold. I really need to go visit them in Tucson. I can understand that. She got out and walked around to the back to help carry in the groceries. Your house is beautiful. Did you buy one of those log cabin kits? Not at all. I bought logs and did all the work myself. It took me 3 years between jobs and on the weekends, but I love this place. I have 3 bedrooms and 2 baths. I would say my kitchen has all the modern conveniences, but compared to the one I put in at your house, it has nothing. Alyssa laughed softly. Well, we did go just a bit overboard on that kitchen. Nick opened the door and watched her face as she stepped inside. She stood, holding the grocery bags, in the middle of his living room and spun in a small circle. I love this. It feels so homey. She put the bags onto the counter and wandered around opening doors. There was a spare bedroom with a king bed made up in it. My parents stay there when they visit, he said. Very cozy. There was a quilt on the bed that had obviously been lovingly pieced. I like this quilt. My grandmother made it. Mom said if she can't be at home, she wants to feel like she is. Nick waited until she was finished in there. He opened the next door for her. This is going to eventually be a bedroom, but for now, I store stuff in here. I need to build a shed, but there hasn't been time. She nodded, walking into the room and looking at the closet. I love these big walk-in closets. They're so perfect. She opened another door and saw that it was a bathroom, connecting the two bedrooms. I'm sure this is convenient for guests as well. He nodded. It is. I love it. Together, they walked to the last door leading off of the main rooms. Now, this room isn't quite as neat. He opened the door, and she peeked in at his bedroom. It showed his personality, she thought. I like it, though. There were wrinkles in the bed that had been hurriedly made. There was an overflowing hamper in the corner of the room. We haven't been giving you any time to do laundry. Why hadn't she thought of that before? He shrugged. I don't like laundry anyway. She laughed. Well, I don't mind if you do it while I'm here. But, what if you see my tidy whities? Alyssa shook her head at him. I guess I'd melt into a puddle of wanton passion if I saw such a thing. Then I'm definitely doing my laundry while you're here. Nick winked at her. Poking her head into the bathroom, she saw a huge bathtub and a shower. I like this. She turned to him and grinned. You did a good job. Thank you. I designed it as well as building it. I should probably have Amanda come in and decorate it, but I like it as it is. I do, too. She walked out of the bedroom and back into the main area of the home, looking around a little more. It had an open concept, and the living room, dining area, and kitchen were all basically one big room. So, I don't need to start cooking for a few hours. Why don't we put the groceries away, and we can watch a movie? He nodded. I'd love that. And I'm putting a load of laundry in the washer, too. I didn't see a washer dryer. She looked around her, trying to figure out where it was hidden. That's because I didn't show you the basement. It's down there, and I don't expect you to follow me down. She shrugged. Then you start the load, and I'll put the groceries away. We'll meet on the couch when we're done. Sounds good to me. You need a laundry chute, she told him as he walked away. He laughed. I have one. I just haven't been down there in a while, and the pile got so high, I couldn't put anything else through it. Wow. Okay. It really is time we gave you a day off.